bring it very slowly out to the very end of the ship. And you see that big noose?
Yeah.
That's going to couple to the sub, and that will be the major
Lifter.
rope that will lift it up, and they'll have a couple of other stabilizers on the side. So the guys are attaching that right now.
What research were you doing that you needed to go down in Alvin for?
We were looking at hydrothermal vents. We were trying to get some samples, and specifically we were looking at how rapidly they form, how old they are, what's the mechanism that they're forming.
Were you nervous, excited, or scared going down in the Alvin?
I wasn't particularly scared. I was certainly nervous. You're in a 9-foot titanium sphere, and you're at a tremendous pressure, and you know, it's the first time I'd ever done it, so yeah, but I was also really excited. Do you know what this is?
No.
What do you think it's made of?
Styrofoam?
Yeah. What do you think would happen if you had that in a bag outside Alvin when it went down?
That's it. Oh, wow.
That's
tiny. Really cool.
So everybody signed it, you see.
Oh, that's so
So
cool.
you have a record of your dive.
Cool.
Sure.
So you brought like that down.
Yeah, this was the original with big signatures.
Wow. And yeah, everybody signed it big. Oh, that's
it's kind of
really
like
cool.
Shrinky Dinks.
Yeah. And I brought Jenny a cup back. I don't know. It started out as a big styrofoam cup.
Yeah.
Came back as a thimble.
Yeah, I can look for it.
What life forms did you see while you were down there?
Oh goodness, all sorts. When you start down, you of course lose ambient light at about 100 meters, 150 meters. It's just dark. But they switch on the lights occasionally. Normally, you don't want to use power until you get down to the bottom. So the lights stay off, so it's completely dark. But
Why
then
don't you want to use power?
the pilot, what?
Why don't you want to use power till you
Because you got to conserve it. You've only got a certain amount of time based on the battery. This is all powered by battery. And so the more you use on the way down, the less you have. But just for the fun of it, the pilot will turn on the lights occasionally, and you see all of this what we call marine snow, which is a debris falling down, and you actually see some fish eating it.
Like goldfish eating goldfish food?
Yeah, just about. But then when you get to the bottom is when you really see the life forms. Tube worms that are the size of a person.
Oh my gosh.
Crabs, fish, clams.
Wow.
That's so
Just
cool.
just the whole bottom is just full of life.
Were there
around the vents.
Were there any bioluminescent creatures?
I saw some of that on the way down. Yeah. Sometimes the wake from the sub as it's sinking will disturb them, and they'll flash. So that's what you see. Mainly it's on the way down.
Is it hard to use the claw snipper thing?
I never had a chance to try.
Aw.
I'm sure that it's a skill you have to master. It's not something that you can do very easily.
What do you do with the sample once it's in the claw?
There's a basket in front of the sub, and we'll see that on the video. It just picks it up, and the basket is subdivided into sections. And so if you get this rock, you'll get a photograph of it, you'll put that into, say, section 1A.
Okay.
And so you have a catalog of exactly where that was collected, so that when the sub comes up, you can pick the things out of 1A and you know it came from that particular event.
Okay.
So here I am. We start off, there's John. There, got my hat on now. I've got some socks. You're not allowed to wear shoes in the sub, so you have to put on heavy socks.
Really, no shoes?
No shoes.
Why?
I'm not really sure.
Extra weight?
No, it's not the weight, it's more the chance that you'll bang something, I guess. I don't know, or step on something you shouldn't. But-
what?
But you start off, they have these tubes that go in and pump in hot air. So the sub initially is quite warm. But then when you get to the bottom, it's 2 degrees centigrade, or about 34, 35 degrees Fahrenheit. And it starts to get cold.
Yeah, I can imagine.
The only heat is the electronics, the no heaters,
And the bodies of the
and the
people in
bodies, yes.
Is it a human?
So they're doing there's a lot of paperwork. Everybody has to sign off saying, yeah, we've checked everything, we've checked this, we've checked that. And so you get to sign off. That's Deborah, who will be the principal diver.
What did you do when you had to go to the bathroom?
I held it. They do have devices that you can use, but I didn't have any coffee that morning, and try not to drink very much fluid. And there's so much going on, it's not a concern generally. Here I am going on to the sub for the dive.
Was there any condensation, like,
Good question.
later from, like, your breath?
Not really, no.
How long were you down there?
About 6.5 hours.
There goes Deborah.
They're going into the,
Oh, wow.
What
So
did
how
you
many
do while the
scientists
pilot
were
drove?
in with you?
What were you saying?
How many scientists were in the sub with you?
How many?
one other. There are two scientists and one pilot.
What did you do while the pilot drove the Alvin?
Well, we looked at, the pilot has a big window in the front, and you have smaller windows in the side. So you can see things the pilot can't see. So you're supposed to be an observer of whatever might be going on that side. The other scientist is looking on the other side. So you've got a pretty good panorama of what's going on around the sub. But generally, the pilot has the best view because he's focusing on what your work assignment is. Taking a water sample, or taking a rock sample, or drilling the core, whatever. And so he by far has the best view. And you can't see out of his porthole. But there's a television screen right above your workstation. And so you can watch what the pilot is doing on the television. And I found myself spending more time watching TV than looking out of my porthole, because my porthole was very, very boring.
Boring in
So you
comparison.
see, they've got divers, or escort guys, who go out once the sub is in the water. It's still attached to the mothership, and so they have to disconnect all of the lines and make sure that everything is secure. And so they will go out on the sub, and once it gets in the water, now they're picking it up now. See, so it's free of the ship. It's going out, and they have this big, what we call an A-frame, where the pulley is on the top, and that will pivot back toward the stern, so that the entire sub can be away from the ship when it goes into the water. There it's hanging on the A-frame.
Did anything unexpected happen while you were in the Alvin?
Not really. You plan out the dive. You know what you're going to do. You have this assignment, this assignment, this assignment in different priorities, and you have a pretty good picture of where you're going to go. You can't go very far. It takes a lot of energy to run the propellers, and so if you can pick different things to do that are pretty tightly, in a pretty tight space, you get a lot more done. than if you want to go here and you want to go here and you want to go here. So even moving as much as a kilometer takes a lot of energy.
Did you see any hydrothermal vents?
Oh, absolutely.
What
There-
color was the smoke?
Mostly it was black, and we saw
Mostly. What
also
other colors?
some white vents, and we saw also just shimmering water. You know, you could tell it was different water because the index of
Like-
refraction
like-
changes through there, so it kind of shimmers, you know, as it comes out of the rock.
Looks kind of like the video.
It's kind of like the video, yeah,
Yeah.
kind of shimmering.
No, better.
So now they're putting it down.
Do you know how hot they got?
The highest temperature we measured was right at 380 degrees centigrade, which is very close to the triple point of water at that pressure.
Triple phases.
That's where you have water between the liquid and the vapor phase, and if you
Yeah.
change either the temperature or the pressure, it'll change from liquid to vapor or vice versa.
Pretty cool.
Were
So you
they
see,
very
these are the guys who are going to disconnect it. So they ride down on the outside with the sub. And so it's hard to appreciate, but you know, one of the most dangerous things is when you have a large object that's just
Yeah.
rocking, you know, back and forth, and you have a big object right next to it, which is the ship. If those two came into contact, most of the superstructure of the Alvin is just fiberglass. It would just collapse. So they take all these precautions to make sure that when they put it in the water, the wind is going right, so the ship is going away, and it's actually slightly steaming. And then the Alvin goes in, it'll move behind the ship.
Were the hydrothermal vents very tall?
Yeah, we saw Godzilla. Godzilla is close to 60 meters tall.
Is that like the name of that vent, or you just
It's the name.
personified
No,
it?
it's an official name of that
Cool.
particular
Yeah.
hydrothermal vent.
I feel like I read about that one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we drilled a hole in Godzilla. In fact, it's getting better. It's getting better.
Clear.
Yeah, now that we're in the water. Okay, so they're checking things out. They've got a patch, so they can talk. They can talk directly to the pilot, and they're going through their checklist of everything, making sure that nothing was left undone.
What type of life forms were around the vent?
The ones I was talking about, mainly the tube worms and the crabs and the clams. Occasionally you see a fish come in. And they're in the water now. So we should start the dive.
Yeah, so that's my hand up. Read that one again.
Did any of your colleagues have anything unexpected happen on any of their dives?
Trying to remember.
Yeah, really.
I don't.
When Kelly was underneath.
Oh, that was not on this dive.
Oh, not on this dive, just in general.
Oh yeah, well, always unexpected. The story of the discovery of the hydrothermal vents was just a whole series of unexpected things,
Oh, really?
because there was both geophysical and geochemical evidence that there was something down there, but we really didn't know what it was. And so they were able to get the Alvin to a place where they thought they might find some warm water. And they dove, and it was barren. They didn't see anything. And when you're in the sub, you can actually communicate with the surface by a voice telephone. But there's no wire, so the sound waves have to go through the ocean, and they get very distorted.
Mm-hmm.
And so it sounds a little bit like when you're in a helium, when you breathe helium and speak.
Oh, well, things going okay down here, but we not really saying very much.
And so the guys on the ship will say, well, yeah, just continue on. And all of a sudden they said,
Huh? The clams down here.
clams? What are you talking about?
Clams. We're seeing, there's a crab.
And the guys on the ship will say, these guys are crazy. What's happened? We got the air blend wrong. They've got too much nitrogen. They're going
crazy.
They're going haywire. And then they said we're following the clam gradient. The what? They said, as you move this direction, you're seeing more and more clams. And so they followed the clam gradient, and they got to a hydrothermal vent. It wasn't a really hot one. It was only about 20 degrees centigrade. But that's 18 degrees
Above
warmer
normal.
than the ambient water.
Yeah.
And it was very obvious. It wasn't a black smoke. It was the simmering water
Yeah.
that they saw. And so they were able to get a sample of that. And based on the chemistry of that water, John Edmund predicted that there were going to be other vents that were 350 to 380 degrees centigrade.
Oh my.
And this was in 1977 when they found the first vents. They had another dive to the East Pacific Rise at 23 degrees north latitude. And the first vent they found was 350 degrees.
Oh wow. That's a lot
Complete,
different.
it was predicted, but boy, did they ever think they would actually find that?
Wow.
So now they're on the recovery. The worst thing you could do in coming up is to come up underneath the ship. So the ship moves well away from the point that the Alvin is going to come up.
And then it comes to meet it.
Yeah, and then they have the guys in the Zodiac come out, and they'll board the Alvin when it emerges from the water, make communication with the pilot. Then the large ship will start coming into position for the recovery.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the recovery, they attach a long line to Alvin to a winch on the ship, and they literally pull it in until it's very, very close to the point that they can drop that A-frame and pick it up.
What's the name of the ship?
The one we were using is called the Atlantis II.
I heard about that one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Also called the A2.
Eight. Okay. Alden wanted me to ask, is it noisy or is it quiet? Yeah, like as you go under
It
the
was
surface.
very, very noisy.
Really?
Graceland was playing.
Oh, he's playing music.
Yeah. The acoustics in Alvin are fantastic
Oh.
because, it's just this metal
Bouncing all
sphere.
your sound right back at you.
I mean, it was, you talk
says
about
it-
stereo, man, this was coming at you from all
Like
sides.
the bathrooms in the wharf, but worse.
Yeah, I can see that.
It's just like.
Yeah, so we played some good, I particularly remember Graceland. That was,
That's pretty fun.
yeah. But otherwise, if the music isn't on, you hear the ship has electronics that are pinging, and so those pings are picked up by the surface vessel, so it knows
It's
where,
like
knows
sonar.
the heading where it is, and it has a lot of cameras, so you hear the camera shutters going bum, 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 all the time.
So semi-quiet, semi-noisy.
Yeah.
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 What, Marshall?
On the way down though, it's very quiet if the music isn't on.
Yeah.
That's when you're just sinking. So this takes a long time, and you're in this thing that's going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. So this is the hardest part of the dive, is the recovery, as far as the people in the sub are concerned.
Do you get out and then
No.
they pick it up, or you stay
They
in while
pick it
they
up,
pick it
yeah,
up?
yeah.
Oh wow.
In the early days of Alvin, they used to let the people get out and come aboard. And the Alvin suddenly took a turn and started filling with water, and it sank.
Uh-oh.
And it was down for several years.
Yeah, two of the steel cables snapped and
Yeah. Yeah.
Just went all the way down.
Mm-hmm. So they never open the hatch until it's safely on the deck of the ship now.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. So that was part of what contributed to its sinking. Was that? I wanted to ask, what do they just mix like oxygen and nitrogen? Because I know I was reading that in other like long-term underwater things, they have like helium mixtures in there.
Yeah, this we just breathe air, but they have a scrubber for CO2.
Okay.
So the main thing is to get the CO2 out of the air, so you're not developing
Right.
excess CO2 in your lungs. And there are several different backups on the scrubbers. And in order to dive now, you have to go through this extensive training on how to troubleshoot the scrubbers. If they're not functioning right, you have to be able to turn that set off, replace the canisters, get a separate unit hooked up. And
Yeah.
so there's a lot of stuff, and everybody has to be able to do that, not just the pilot.
Yeah.
Because if something happened to the pilot,
Redundancy. We need it.
yeah. No, they're very, very conscious of safety.
What was the other question?
Now, you see, we're still out there. We're just bobbing along this whole time that you've been watching this. I think they've got the line on now, so it's coming closer.
I have one question from Alden, but one for me. Why were you looking at this hydrothermal vent? Like, what specific question were you trying to answer?
Specifically, we were trying to find out how old it was, and of course, the corollary of that is how quickly they form.
Oh, okay. What'd you find?
We found they're pretty young.
It makes sense to me.
They form very quickly.
How long do they stick around? Like, is Godzilla still?
Well, Godzilla is probably on the order of several hundred years old.
Okay.
Not many thousand.
And then Alden wanted me to ask if anything like spooky or something that you couldn't explain, did anything, what was how he described it? He said not real, but that's not what he meant.
Yeah. I think I get the gist.
Yeah,
I get the
anything
gist
like
of
that
it.
happen.
Not really, not to me on this one. Jenny though reminded me of an incident, not during this cruise, but again, John Edmund and his student Kelly Faulkner were on a dive, and the pilot got a little bit too far in under a ledge.
Uh-oh.
And that's the thing you never do, because the Alvin is built in such a way that if anything happens, they can basically jettison everything. The whole safety is based on buoyancy.
Right.
So they have railroad ties.
And if you're under a ledge, you don't.
No buoyancy.
You don't want to come up under a ledge because you don't come up very far.
Oh.
They were able to get out, but they were really, really sweating it.
That is scary. Did they just maneuver their way out? Oh, okay.
Yeah. You can reduce buoyancy by exhausting some air so that you sink a little bit more. So they were, you're balancing your air supply versus your safety.
Let's see, did you ask all the questions?
Now we're finally
Yeah.
in position for them to pick us up. That whole time we had been
Bobbing
bouncing
around.
out there in the
Do
ocean.
people get seasick?
Well, unfortunately, none of us did, and that.
Well, I would think once you kind of go under, it's not.
Once you're under, it's fine. It's the recovery.
Yeah.
It's when you're on the surface waiting for them to get that line on and get attached to the ship
Yeah,
that you're just at the mercy of the waves.
that's really.
I mean, there's no stability on the Alvin. I mean, you can literally see the horizons just going.
Oh
like
my
that.
gosh, yeah.
Like
I
being
would
in a
get
big
nauseated.
ball.
Do you have any questions? I'm gonna say thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, you're going to get to see the recovery, and then we're going to see the basket with the samples,
Oh, cool.
as murky as it's going to be.
I'm gonna get a drink of water really quick. Come right back. Right back.
It's going to take a while. It's very slow.
Here, we'll stop this and then.